What is going on, guys? My name is Charlie, and in this video I will be ranking the presidents and give a brief explanation why for each. So without further ado, let's get started. So we begin with the father of our nation, George Washington. He goes in the S tier. Besides leading our country to victory against the British and founding the greatest country on earth, he set the stage for the presidency. He always protected the Constitution and never abused his power. We owe him a great amount of gratitude for what he did for this nation. John Adams, a decent founding father, but a disappointing president. I will put him in the D tier. He signed laws that made it a crime to criticize the government and presided over a brief undeclared naval war with France, which helped seal his defeat in 1800. So I give him a D ranking. I will, however, give him credit for being one of the two of the first 10 presidents who never owned slaves. Thomas Jefferson, a great president. I will put him in the A tier. This guy, he got the Louisiana Territory from France, the Louisiana Purchase, which doubled the size of our country. He led us to victory against the Barbary pirates, and he abolished the slave trade, despite being a slave owner himself. So, very flawed as a person, but nonetheless a great president who helped set the path forward for our country. James Madison, solid leader. He led us through the War of 1812. I will put him in the B tier. James Monroe, big fan of him. He presided over the era of good feelings, and he set the stage for over 100 years of an isolationist foreign policy, putting America first through the Monroe Doctrine. I will put him in the A tier. John Quincy Adams, he didn't do very much, and he was the first and only president to not have won neither the popular vote nor the electoral vote in the 1824 election. He was elected by a group of House delegations, allegedly through a quote-unquote corrupt bargain. So, an okay president, but nothing special, so I will put him in the C tier. Andrew Jackson, strong leader. He fought against the nullification crisis, kept our country together, also fought against central banking, which is something we need to learn to do today. I will give him a B ranking. He would have been higher if he hadn't been so cruel to the natives. The Trail of Tears happened under him, which was a very horrible and sad thing, so that alone causes him to not be ranked higher, but still very solid overall. Martin Van Buren, very irrelevant president. I'm gonna put him in the D tier. William Henry Harrison, I forgot. I'm gonna add a tier below F. Hold on, guys. Incomplete. I'll make the color blue. So yeah, I will put him in. In the incomplete tier. He only served 1 month as president and was sick with pneumonia for almost all of it, which killed him. Apparently, he didn't wear a jacket during his inauguration, which was a very cold day. He developed a cold and it turned into pneumonia, and he died a month later. And as such, I can't rank him. Next, we have John Tyler, who served for most of Harrison's term. Another irrelevant president, didn't have any notable accomplishments. I will put him in the D tier. James K. Polk, very underrated and very underappreciated president. If you want a president who will keep all of his promises, look to Polk. He got everything he promised to do done. A stronger believer in manifest destiny. He got us places like California, the Oregon Territory, pretty much all the remaining western parts of our country. He won a war with Mexico, and he did all of this in one term, 4 years. He pledged at the very beginning to get all of this land out west within 4 years and then retire, and he kept true to his word. And because of that, I will put him in the A tier. He deserves a lot more recognition. Next, we have Zachary Taylor. Again, I will put him in the incomplete tier. Served only a little over a year as president before he died of a stomach sickness. Not much out of him as president. Next, we have Millard Fillmore, another forgettable president. and he signed into law the Fugitive Slave Act, which allowed slave catchers to go into northern states to recapture slaves who were trying to escape. He belongs in the D tier. Franklin Pierce, very weak leader. He helped fuel divisions over slavery by trying to expand it out west, which caused Americans to start murdering each other in the Kansas Territory, which was known as Bleeding Kansas. Not a good president. He belongs in the F tier. James Buchanan, this guy is arguably the worst president we ever had, enforced the Dred Scott decision, which basically said that black men and women are not people and they are property, so they can't be protected under our Constitution. He claimed that he was personally opposed to slavery, but you can't be opposed to slavery and then enforce a horrible decision like that. And he did very little to soothe the divisions that caused this country to collapse into civil war, and also did absolutely nothing to stop the southern states from seceding from the Union after Lincoln won the 1860 election, and because of this incompetence, he belongs in the F tier for sure. Abraham Lincoln, the man who led the country through its greatest test, the man who won the Civil War, the man who abolished the horrific institution of slavery, and who never gave up trying to save the Union. He belongs in the S tier. Up there with Washington, one of the two best presidents we've ever had. A great man and a great leader. He had his flaws. He overstepped his authority sometimes, suspending habeas corpus, but despite all that, he still is one of the two best presidents we've ever had. Andrew Johnson, horrible president, a huge downgrade from Lincoln. This guy fought Congress every step of the way to prevent securing rights for the newly freed slaves. Thankfully, almost all of his vetoes were overridden by Congress. The first president to be impeached, I don't think it was fair for him to be impeached because he was impeached over an unconstitutional law, but nevertheless, he belongs in the F tier just below Buchanan. Horrible president. Ulysses S. Grant. This man is extremely underrated. For years, his reputation was smeared as drunk and corrupt. However, these claims are greatly exaggerated. His administration, it was corrupt, but he never partook in any of it, and he actually tried to fight against it. And apart from all this, he helped secure voting rights for African American men through the 15th Amendment. He crushed the first KKK and made it clear to the southern states that as long as he was president, they will allow blacks to vote. It wasn't until after he left office that Jim Crow pretty much took over the South. And because of this, I think he belongs in the A tier. Rutherford B. Hayes, another irrelevant president, and stopped federal support for civil rights in the South. He belongs in the D tier. James A. Garfield. He's the last president I will put in the incomplete tier. Served only 6 months as president before he was assassinated, the second president to be assassinated. He was killed by a man who apparently was pissed off that Garfield didn't give him a job, so that's unfortunate. Chester A. Arthur, another forgettable president, didn't have any major accomplishments. I will put him in the D tier. Grover Cleveland, the only president to serve 2 terms non-consecutively as the 22nd and 24th president. Pretty good president, too. He fought to preserve the gold standard, he prevented the government from getting too big, he presided over economic prosperity in his first term, became famous for his use of the veto power, which he once used to stop federal aid for drought relief in Texas. His second term was unfortunately not the best since the nation was in an economic depression. I think he belongs in the B tier overall. I'll put him above Madison. We could learn a lot from Grover Cleveland. Benjamin Harrison, not a great president, but not bad either. He protected U.S. industry. He signed the Sherman Antitrust Act into law, which he could have enforced better. So I will put him as a C-level president overall. And then after him, Cleveland served his second term as 24th president. So we will skip ahead and go to William McKinley. Solid leader. He presided over a great economy. He annexed Hawaii and led us into the Spanish-American War, which I have mixed feelings about because this is where America starts to become less of an isolationist nation. I will give him probably like a C plus ranking. I could understand those who give him a B ranking. He's also unfortunately the third president to be assassinated just a few months into his second term, which gives us Theodore Roosevelt. Now, a lot of you are going to criticize me for this, but Teddy is really overrated. His progressive policies are what helped the federal government to become much bigger than it was supposed to be. This has helped increase our reliance on them and led to the agency known as the FDA, which today is creating an era of medical tyranny. What I like Teddy for is his pursuit of trust busting, and this has helped preserve a capitalist economy and prevent companies from getting too big, which we could really use today. Big tech. So overall, I will put him in the C tier. And by the way, it was because of Teddy's big ego that the Republican vote was split in the 1912 election, which is how we got a horrible president named Wilson, who I will get to after explaining William Howard Taft. I like this guy a lot more than I like Teddy. He actually broke up more trusts than Teddy did, and was a lot more focused on protecting the Constitution, and was a huge proponent, no pun intended, of conservatism. What I don't like about him is the fact that he helped ratify the 16th Amendment, the Income Tax Amendment, so I will give him a B ranking overall. There we go. Now we have Woodrow Wilson. This guy, absolutely terrible. Why? Well, he created the cancer known as the Federal Reserve, which has caused the value of our currency to plummet over the years. He believed that Congress should not have many checks on the presidency, that a president should be, in his words, as big a man as he can. He levied the first income tax, he flip-flopped on World War I, and used the war to restrict freedom of speech with the Sedition Act and the Espionage Act. He signed the Selective Service Act, which started, well, I don't know if it started, but it increased the draft. Lynchings of African Americans skyrocketed under him. The second KKK bloomed, and he was sympathetic to them. He definitely belongs in the F tier. The only good thing that he did was ratify the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. But overall, horrible president. I'd say he's on par with Buchanan as the worst president. And next we have Warren G. Harding. Again, he was not a good president. He presided over a corrupt administration, and although he didn't partake in any of it, he didn't do too much to stop it. So I will put him in the lower D tier. And by the way, he was only elected because all the women thought he was cute. No joke. Calvin Coolidge. This guy is another very underrated president. He presided over a time of economic prosperity. He always put the Constitution first. He gave all Native American citizenship. And he was like the last president to understand that the government is not the answer to our problems. So for all this, I will put him in the A tier. Herbert Hoover. This guy was one of the worst presidents we've ever had. The economy collapsed into the Great Depression under his watch. His attempts to fix it did nothing but help worsen the problem, and he wasn't able to communicate with the people, so he definitely belongs in the F tier. Now we have Franklin D. Roosevelt. I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but I will put FDR in the D tier. Let me explain. I'm not a fan of the New Deal at all. It really didn't end the Great Depression. In fact, it actually helped prolong the Great Depression. And besides that, it helped make our economy more dependent on the federal government, which is the opposite of what was envisioned for this nation. The welfare state was created under him, Social Security and public housing, for example. Social Security has helped create a huge burden of debt on our country today, and we can thank FDR for getting that started. His attempts to pack the Supreme Court set a dangerous precedent, and he served too long as president. But he was a good leader during World War II. He gave a great speech to Congress after Pearl Harbor was attacked, emphasizing how we're going to get back at the Japanese. He helped mobilize our country fairly quickly. The major flaw with him as a World War II leader was placing thousands of Japanese Americans in internment camps. Not a good thing at all. So overall, he belongs in the D tier. Harry S. Truman. A decent president. He made the tough but the right decision to drop the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. His handling of the post-World War II economy was good. He helped bring down inflation. He sent a strong message against communism. However, he massively overstepped his authority by federalizing steel mills, which he was struck down by the Supreme Court. And the age of isolationism officially ended under his watch. I have mixed feelings about the Marshall Plan. And he began the precedent of not asking Congress to declare war by ordering troops to go fight in Korea, which he could have handled much better than he did. So I will give him a C plus ranking. Dwight Eisenhower, great president. He presided over a time of economic prosperity, pulled us out of Korea, was tough on illegal immigration, was able to get illegal immigrants deported quickly. He built our interstate highway system, expanding our country's ability to travel throughout the country. So many things were added to the cultural world. He fought for the civil rights of African Americans by enforcing desegregation in our education system. He signed the Civil Rights Act of 1957. The American dream was shining very bright under his watch. As such, I will put him in the A tier. John F. Kennedy. JFK is very overrated. He gets more recognition than he deserves, mainly because he was assassinated, which has spurred a bunch of conspiracy theories. He botched the Bay of Pigs invasion, but he helped redeem himself a bit with his great handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Still very overrated overall. I will put him in the C tier. Lyndon B. Johnson. Awful president. His expansion of the welfare state through his so-called Great Society has only increased our reliance on the government, helping to destroy the American dream. Full-scale deployment of American troops in Vietnam happened under his watch, and he completely screwed up the war with terrible strategy. We lost thousands of men for a country that had no desire to fight communism. We dropped more bombs during the Vietnam War than we did in World War II. The only good thing LBJ did was sign the Civil Rights Act of 1964 into law. But other than that, horrible president. He belongs in the F tier for sure. Richard Nixon. Not a big improvement from LBJ. He pulled our troops out of Vietnam while increasing the bombing of Vietnam. He invaded Cambodia without congressional approval, furthering the precedent of going to war without a declaration of war. He helped exacerbate the government bureaucracy by creating the EPA, vastly increasing government regulation. He normalized relations with China, which has helped lead to the rise of an evil competitor that threatens our place as the world leader today. And this goes without mentioning the numerous corruption scandals he had, including Watergate. So I believe he belongs in the lower D tier. Gerald Ford. It's difficult for me to rank him since he didn't do very much and didn't serve a full term. A bunch of things happened under his watch that were out of his control, including the fall of Saigon. Inflation began to spiral out of control. He wasn't a very notable president. And also his pardoning of Nixon was very controversial. I'm split on whether or not that was the right thing to do. So I will put him in the D tier. Jimmy Carter. Terrible. Just terrible. Inflation and unemployment continued to go up under his watch. Gas prices skyrocketed. The economy was in shambles. The Iranian hostage crisis happened under him, which he could have handled a lot better. His attempt to rescue the hostages with Desert Storm was an embarrassing failure. A very weak president. He belongs in the F tier for sure. He is a good person, though. He does give a lot to charity. I will give him credit for that. A good person, not a good president. Ronald Reagan. Huge improvement from Carter. Inflation was brought down considerably in his first term, which was followed by a time of economic prosperity. He dramatically lowered taxes and regulation, was a great communicator with a great sense of humor. He once famously said to a reporter who asked if he had any blame for a recession that happened under his watch, and he said, "Yes, because for many years I was a Democrat." So that's kind of who he was. He was a comedian too. His leadership, it helped lead to the downfall of communism throughout the world. He had a great relationship with the Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. However, he also passed mass amnesty for illegal immigrants. He passed gun control, and the Iran-Contra affair helped put a stain on his legacy. So overall, I will put him in the upper B tier. George H.W. Bush, very mediocre president. He broke his promise not to raise taxes, though he handled the Persian Gulf War well. I don't think, though, we had any business going there in the first place. So I will put him in the D tier. Bill Clinton. The economy improved under his watch. He got the spending under control, which led to a surplus. He was able to communicate with Newt Gingrich, who was the Speaker of the House at the time. The Republicans controlled Congress most of his presidency. However, he also signed NAFTA into law, which hurt our industries for many years to come. The Black Hawk Down incident happened under his watch. He signed another gun control measure into law. And he also signed the Notorious Crime Bill of 1994, which began an era of mass incarceration for even the slightest offenses. Terrorism began to go out of control. He was impeached for lying under oath about his affair with Monica Lewinsky. He was full of scandals. So I think he belongs in the D tier. Right there. Alright. George W. Bush, abysmal president. He started off as like a president who was just there, and then 9/11 happened, and in the beginning he handled it really well. I mean, his approval rating skyrocketed to over 90%, and he took us to war in Afghanistan to hunt down Osama bin Laden. But after he escaped into Pakistan, Bush just took his eye off the ball and started a completely pointless war in Iraq, which led to even more terrorism in the region. He began the surveillance state with the Patriot Act, leading to an era of Americans being spied on by their government. The economy collapsed in 2007 and 2008. It wasn't really his fault, but he didn't respond to it correctly. So, for these reasons, I'm going to put him in the F tier. Barack Obama, another terrible president, expanded the welfare state, kept the wars going. ISIS emerged and spread its ugly face throughout the world and threatens to this day the security of our nation. Obamacare was and still is a complete disaster. It was meant to make healthcare cheaper, but only increased the costs. Economic recovery was really slow. His overregulation of the economy helped slow it further. The national debt doubled under his watch. He negotiated a terrible deal with Iran. He supported a bad trade deal with a bunch of countries in Asia. Thankfully, it was never ratified. I will give him credit, though, for killing Osama bin Laden. But again, he dragged out the conflict in Afghanistan longer than it needed to be. So I will put him in the F tier. Donald Trump. This man is the reason I'm into politics. He was a great president who told like it was. Before COVID hit, the economy was shining bright. He replaced NAFTA with another trade deal that was much better. He was tough on China. The ISIS caliphate almost completely collapsed. He fought for a secure border. And when COVID hit, he stepped back and let the states decide how to respond to it, refusing to partake in the biggest power grab in our history, which I believe allowed us to see who was good and who was bad, in terms of governors and other politicians for that matter. He started Operation Warp Speed, which developed 3 vaccines in less than a year, which I have mixed feelings about, but still, pretty good thing that he did. He was smeared by the media every chance they had by perpetuating falsehoods that he colluded with Russia to sway his election, 2 purely political impeachments, among other things. He had his flaws, though. He spent way too much money. He increased our debt and deficit even further, especially when COVID hit. He was too cozy with Israel, too cozy with Saudi Arabia, and his cabinet appointments were often bad picks. He was often self-defeating with his rhetoric, and he had a huge ego. But overall, he is my favorite president of my lifetime so far. I would not mind him winning in 2024 at all. So I will put him in the B tier. And there you have it, guys. There is my ranking of each president. Let me know what y'all think in the comments below. Leave a like if you want. Share it too. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you later.